You ever heard of the scooter company, Kymco? Did you know that they make mini motos now too? This is the Kymco Spade 150. Midget Moto, another YouTuber, invited me out to check out his bike. I want to see what it looks like, see what it does, and I'm curious to know, is Kymco something that you should look into? Is it something that's just another knockoff? Is it a clone, or is it its own brand and should it stand by itself? Let's take a look. So just by looking over it, I'm kind of impressed by some of the quality. As far as the build composite, some of the features are things that I think are a little lower end compared to other bikes. Things like you've got standard forks, you've got pretty weak rear suspension, but, and I don't know if you've seen my Grom clone video, I'm seeing multiple engine mounts, which was something I didn't like about the Grom clone from like the Boom Vader that only had 2 or 3 mounts to it. This, I can see it's got the swing arm mount, it's got a lower mount, 2 at the crank and 1 at the head, so that motor's probably not going to go anywhere. That's a good start. It is fuel injected. I love seeing that on the smaller bikes. Makes it much more reliable for a new rider. You don't have to worry about messing with carburetors or having to clean them if they sit for too long. Always a good thing to see when it's fuel injected. I don't know that I would trust this bike enough to wheelie it though. The neck itself, the down tube of the frame looks very, very small. So be cognizant of that. This isn't necessarily a stunt bike. If you want a stunt bike, go get a Grom or something else, but as far as the frame, it's pretty small. But again, it's a very, very small bike. For front brakes, you've got a dual piston caliper, 1 rotor on one side, but on the back brake, you have a drum brake. It will work to stop this bike. This bike is fairly light. It's only about 225 pounds or so, 250 pounds, excuse me. So drum brakes should be sufficient. I'm curious to see how it feels on the road, to see if there's something like really bad about a drum brake, but first off, it's not bad. It's not a terrible thing. It's just something worth noting. I gotta point this out. That little shoe, it's too cool. Little kickstand shoe. There's also a rear stand. Very helpful. Very helpful on tire changes. You don't have to worry about needing an additional stand. Throw down that center stand, pull the rear wheel off for maintenance or whatever you need. Very cool that they have that. It's enough talking. Let's go ride it. Let's have some fun. All right, let's check this out. Got Midget Moto on the Z125. He's doing a first impressions of that. I'll link the video in the description. But let's check out what this little Spade has to offer. There is no gear indicator on the dash. Very basic dash. That actually had a pretty clean little shift there. Now this is a 5-speed gearbox. It feels like such a little toy. Brakes work all right. Haven't tried the back brake yet with the drum brake part. I think I would be very comfortable putting my daughter on this bike and saying, go have some fun with it. I think she'd be able to do it. This is a very low risk type of bike. Very simple, very easy, very good for a beginner. I think that's definitely the target market for this bike. I'm actually impressed by the transmission. The transmission's pretty smooth. Now, something Midget Moto did mention in one of his videos is that this gas light. He said regardless of how much gas is actually in this bike, that gas light may or may not go off, so it's very hard to figure out if you need to get fuel. The seat itself is not uncomfortable, but the rear suspension is not the best. I will say that. It does not feel plush or structured, really. It feels like 2 springs were just on the back. One of the questions that I have for this bike today is, if you could pick one of these up for $2,000, should you get this or should you get a Z125, spend some more money? Because you can get a Z125 for about $2,500 to $300 or $3,000. So is this worth the minimal amount of money? I think it's a cool toy. I don't question the reliability. One thing about Kymco that is worth noting, if you don't know anything about Kymco, do a little bit of research on them. They've been around since 1963. That's a really long time for a company, and it's not like they were making ATMs. They weren't making chainsaws. They've been making parts for Honda motorcycles since the 60s. Yes, I said Honda. They actually made parts for Honda for about 20 years. Oh, those back brakes are terrible. So we can just go down here and cruise for a bit and then turn around and come back. You cool with that? It's a really easy clutch to operate too. The controls all make sense. They're all in the right place. They do what they're supposed to do. All right, let's see how fast it'll go. He said that he can get it to about 55, but he weighs more than I do. There's 57. Oh, red line at 60. I got it to 60. But then it started to sputter out because it was that red line. I think if you were to do some gearing changes, maybe throw a 1/2 bigger sprocket on the front, you could get a little extra oomph out of it and get it to something that could potentially do more, maybe 65 miles per hour. But this is not a bike that you take on the highway. This is an around town bike. This is back roads like this. I see this as somebody who is using it as a quick commuter. If you're going just around town, maybe you're going to run some errands, go and have some dinner with friends, or a high school student who's riding to school. That would be a fantastic person to put on this bike. The suspension's not terrible. Now, Midget Moto said that he rides this long distances all the time. Like, he rode over 40 minutes to get to me today. I don't know that I could do that on this bike. With sub 60 miles per hour, I think that's hard. The foot pegs, even though they're just knurled metal, they actually don't feel that buzzy. They do buzz, but it's not like I'm saying I need to have rubber pegs. They work just fine. And please don't get mad at me. I'm wearing shorts. It's still 100 degrees outside. I do wish it had a gear indicator. That's something that the Z125 and the Grom both have that I feel would benefit this too. All right, let's turn into this plaza and we can talk a little bit more. So the Kymco Spade 150, I like it. I wouldn't buy it. I don't think it fits my style, and I don't really like some of the things like the suspension or the back brakes. I feel like it could use a bit more to get me to the point where I'd want to buy it. I'd go with the Z125 because it's got the disc brakes, it's got the inverted forks, and it's only a few $100s more. So that's my preference. Curious to know what your thoughts are. If you've ridden this bike, if you'd want to ride this bike, or if you'd want to buy this bike, make some comments below. Very curious to know what you think. If you're looking at the Z125 or the Grom, watch this video right here. It'll help you make a decision on which one to get from those two.